Michael's house just sold, the one in Chicago,
Yeah.
right? I think it sold for like 9.6 million or some number like that, if I'm not mistaken. We like the house. We were interested, but possibly doing something with that because the history in it. How often did you guys hang out in that house, go shooting, basketball, talking, mentally getting ready for the playoffs?
I never shot basketball there. I actually would go over in the morning when Grover was training. We would train together.
Scottie, can you get the mic a little bit closer?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was actually, I would train with Michael. I guess the last 3 championships that we won, we trained together at his house. But other than that, we didn't really.
NBA turned basketball into a global obsession and built a dynasty that still feels untouchable today. But here's the part nobody talks about. They never once sat down for dinner together. Not one time. That alone should make you pause, because how did 2 men dominate the sport for nearly a decade and never build something real off the court? Now, enter Charles Oakley. Not a hot-take artist, not some random voice chasing views. This was one of the toughest players to ever step on an NBA floor, a man who literally protected Michael Jordan with his body. He was the enforcer, the shield, the guy who handled the dirty work so Jordan could fly. And Oakley just said something that tears the shine off the most celebrated partnership in basketball history. When you really hear what he revealed, the whole Jordan and Scottie Pippen story starts to look different, because what destroyed that relationship was not some loud fight, not a trade rumor, not even money. It was something deeper, something that had been building quietly since 1987, something that sat in that locker room year after year, growing stronger while the world only saw championships. You know, one thing to say, I'm going to be better than Mike. And I looked at him twice. Your best player always going to get special treatment. So when your best player gets special treatment, he got to treat the other guys on the team. You know what I'm saying? You just can't, okay, you get everything, don't deal with us. And back in the 80s and 90s was a lot of that. Horse is the type of guy, Horse probably didn't like Mike, because Mike got his way in all kind of ways. His security can travel, he can do this and that. Some guys can't handle that. Oakley was there before the banners, before Pippen arrived, before the glory. He saw the early Bulls, the struggling Bulls, the nights when Jordan's intensity felt less like leadership and more like a storm rolling through the building. He watched the pecking order form in real time, and once that hierarchy locked in, it never changed. One man at the top, everyone else orbiting around him. And when Oakley talks, he does not play games. He is not polishing reputations. He is not protecting legacies. What he described about the invisible tension inside those Bulls locker rooms hits harder than anything we read in the Jordan rules. That book shook the league in 1992, but this feels even more raw. This is not second-hand reporting. This is testimony from someone who stood shoulder to shoulder with them. Here's the uncomfortable truth that fans struggle to accept. Jordan and Pippen were not close. They were not best friends. They were coworkers. Elite coworkers, yes. Historically dominant at the same job, yes. But emotionally connected? Not really. The same system that made them champions also drove a wedge between them. The marketing machine focused on one face, the spotlight pointed in one direction, the preferential treatment was obvious, and over time, that kind of imbalance does something to a locker room. It builds quiet resentment, it creates distance, it turns partnership into business. So while the world celebrated rings and parades, something else was happening behind closed doors, something subtle, something personal. And according to Oakley, that slow burn is what truly tore the foundation apart. The dynasty was not built on brotherhood, it was built on imbalance. And that imbalance cracked both of them in completely different ways. One became larger than life. The other spent decades fighting to be seen as more than a sidekick. Every piece of this story proves it. Charles Oakley remembers the exact moment he realized Scottie Pippen was not just another role player, he was a threat. Think about how bold that is. A young Pippen, not yet an all-star, not yet proven, standing in that locker room next to Michael Jordan, the most relentless competitor in the league, and saying out loud that he was going to surpass him. That is not small talk. That is not locker room hype. That is a statement loaded with ambition.
How many times did just you and Michael have dinner in Chicago?
Chicago has a lot of great Scottie. Stop it.
Scottie, stop it.
You and Michael never had dinner together one-on-one.
No. Asian, great teammate, but we just never were great friends. Never. Even when you guys played. No. But if you look back in our era, back in the 80s and 90s, it was a lot of selfish ball players because guys didn't look out for other guys on their team. And I've seen that a lot for myself. The main guy didn't do other stuff for some guys who didn't have a lot. I don't think Scottie hate Mike. He feel like he got some feelings that he probably should have been represented more, and maybe The Last Dance and some other things. He might not have got all the credit he deserved, but you know how the NBA go. They got a few. They certain guys they go on market. Some guys think they should get market and don't. I think he did a lot for the organization in Chicago. You know, the fans love him in Chicago.
Oakley caught it instantly. He heard the tone. He saw the body language. He understood what it meant. Because in that building, Jordan controlled the air. When someone speaks like that around a man wired like Jordan, it does not get brushed aside. It gets stored. It gets remembered. And according to Oakley, Jordan never forgot it. That one sentence planted something dangerous, a quiet rivalry inside what the world believed was a perfect partnership. Fans were sold the image of unity, of two stars moving in sync. But underneath that image, Pippen wanted more than wins. He wanted acknowledgement. He wanted equal respect. He wanted his name spoken in the same breath, not as a footnote. That desire followed him for decades. You can see it in interviews. You can feel it in the way he talks about legacy. It was never just about rings. It was about identity. And here is the part the mythology avoids. The Bulls were not built as a team of equals pulling the rope together. It was a kingdom. Jordan was the king. Different security, different treatment, different rules. The structure made that crystal clear. Oakley even pointed to Horace Grant as an example. Grant helped win 3 championships. He sacrificed, he battled every night. Yet even he grew frustrated with how uneven things felt. When he left for the Orlando Magic, reports said he shared inside knowledge about Chicago's plays. That is not random pettiness. That is built-up resentment boiling over. This was bigger than basketball. It was about dignity, about being treated like a partner instead of background support. And if Horace Grant, a 3-time champion, felt that tension, imagine what Scottie Pippen carried silently for more than 10 years. If you really want to understand what happened between Jordan and Pippen, do not look at the parade footage. Do not replay the champagne celebrations. Listen to how Pippen answered a simple question about their relationship. That is where the truth starts to show. Never, not once, in more than 10 years of playing side by side, through 6 championships, through parades and pressure and global fame, they never once sat down for dinner together. Let that sink in. In a city like Chicago, packed with steakhouses, jazz clubs, private lounges, and every late-night hideout you could imagine, 2 men who built one of the greatest runs in sports history never shared a quiet meal across a table. That is not chemistry. That is not brotherhood. That is business. And Scottie Pippen confirmed it without hesitation. No awkward laugh, no attempt to smooth it over, no diplomatic spin to protect the legacy. Just a clean, blunt answer. Never. That one word shattered the fairy tale. The brotherhood fans believed in was a broadcast illusion. On camera, it looked tight. Off camera, it was distant, cold, permanent distance. Charles Oakley zoomed the lens out even further. He made it clear this was not just personal tension. It was cultural. It was structural. It was about how that era treated stars versus everyone else. How you the best when you weren't even the best on your own team? How you the best when you weren't even the #1 option? If you're the best, why were you pouting on the bench when Phil Jackson called Tony Kukoc's number instead of yours in a playoff series against the Knicks? If you the best, why was Bill Cartwright in the locker room crying while excoriating you from abandoning your teammates? You led. You led, you also quit. You quit. You had a migraine in '87. You had a migraine in a Game 7 against the Pistons. Michael Jordan was left crying on a bus in his daddy's arms talking about when we gon' win. He's been asked about Jordan and LeBron, or Jordan versus LeBron, or Jordan versus Kobe forever. Scottie Pippen never told nobody, nah, it's actually me that should be in that conversation. But the book is out now, and the book's been out for a while, and he's still salty about The Last Dance because it was about Jordan instead of the team, not realizing if it didn't come through the prism of Jordan would have never been popular. But he doesn't get that. This is the part of the golden age people avoid. The stars feasted, the others watched. Michael Jordan became a global empire, 100 million Nike deals, the most marketed athlete the world had ever seen. His face was everywhere. Sneaker boxes, Gatorade bottles, billboards from Tokyo to Times Square. He was not just a player. He was a brand, a machine, a symbol. Meanwhile, Scottie Pippen signed a 7-year, $18 million contract, one of the most team-friendly deals in league history. While Jordan was building generational wealth, Pippen was locked into a contract that looked smaller every single year. The salary cap exploded. Ownership did not rush to fix it. The front office let it sit. And Jordan, publicly at least, did not go to war for his teammates' money. That matters, because when you are sacrificing your body every night, guarding the best player, running the offense, doing the dirty work, and you see the gap widen financially and culturally, it builds something inside you. Not overnight, slowly, quietly, year after year. That is not an equal partnership. That is a power structure, and power structures eventually crack under their own weight. Now, here is where the story turns complicated. If you only listen to Oakley and Pippen, the narrative feels simple. Pippen was undervalued, underpaid, underappreciated, living in a shadow so large it blocked out his own sunlight. But not everyone agrees with that framing. Stephen A. Smith did not gently disagree. He went straight at it. He pulled out receipts. He listed moments that still follow Pippen to this day. The 1994 playoff game against the Knicks, when Pippen refused to re-enter after the final play was drawn up for someone else. The migraine game in the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals against the Detroit Pistons, where critics say he struggled under the brightest lights. The performances that, fair or unfair, created the perception that when the pressure peaked, Jordan never blinked, but Pippen sometimes did. Smith's argument was sharp. He basically said, greatness is not just about talent, it is about durability under fire, about carrying the burden every single night. And in his view, Jordan carried that burden in a way few athletes ever have. So now you have two versions of the truth. One says Pippen was suffocated by imbalance.
The other says he had chances to seize the throne and did not always deliver. Somewhere in between those extremes is the real story. And that is what makes this fracture so fascinating, because it was never simple. It was never clean. It was two alpha competitors locked in a system that crowned one king and left the other fighting for oxygen. That last line cuts deep. The Last Dance, the documentary that brought the Bulls dynasty roaring back into global conversation, only happened because of Michael Jordan's gravitational pull. Without Jordan as the centerpiece, that series does not get greenlit. It does not dominate headlines. It does not pull in over 20 million viewers. And Scottie Pippen's name does not get reintroduced to a whole new generation. Oh, right around the pandemic. Did it end up being good? The conversation? Yeah, I guess good and final. That's what it was. Yeah, I don't want to take because of who. It's just Scottie good and final. I just think that Michael is a very difficult person to deal with. I've played with him for years, so I know that, when it's time for you to move in your direction, then go in your direction. Don't sit there and try to procrastinate or stretch it. The relationship is not where it was or not what it used to be, and it's never going to be the same. So why try and make something out of nothing, or try to make something that was never there? That is the brutal irony. The same spotlight Pippen resented is the exact spotlight that kept him relevant decades later. Without Jordan, there is no global revival tour. But here is what most people miss, and Oakley saw it clearly. Pippen's frustration was not about ego, it was about erasure. Represented more. Two simple words, but they carry 30 years of weight. Pippen never said he wanted to replace Jordan. He never said he needed to be crowned the greatest. What he wanted was acknowledgement. He wanted the story told honestly. He wanted people to understand that without him, there are no 6 rings, no dynasty, no mythology. Oakley said it straight. The fans loved Pippen, teammates respected him, but the league did not market him like Jordan. The organization did not compensate him like Jordan. And when the documentary finally arrived, the one that was supposed to celebrate the entire run, it leaned heavily into one man's perspective. That is the cost of being Robin. You give everything to the mission, and when history gets written, you are a chapter instead of the headline. Pippen gave Chicago his prime, his defense, his versatility, his willingness to guard the toughest matchup every night. He sacrificed touches, shots, and recognition. In return, he got a bargain contract, a permanent supporting label, and a relationship that never felt whole. Even Steve Kerr, who was inside that second three-peat locker room, has admitted the dynamic was complicated. Professionally, they were elite, locked in, focused, but personally, there was distance. Teammates felt it, they saw it, it just was never openly discussed because winning covered everything up. Then came 2021. Pippen released his memoir, Unguarded, and he stopped filtering. He laid out the grievances, the frustrations, the moments he felt overlooked. When asked about his final conversation with Jordan, he did not soften it. He described it as good and final. That is not someone fishing for reconciliation. That is someone who made peace with the distance. And then, the line that closes the door completely. You can't try to make something that was never there. That hits hard, because it suggests they did not fall apart. You cannot fall apart if you were never truly together to begin with. What they had was a professional alliance, a ruthless, effective, championship-producing alliance. 6 titles, 2 three-peats, the most dominant stretch the league had seen. But underneath the rings and parades and highlight reels were 2 men who never shared a dinner, never called each other close friends, and operated inside a structure that elevated one and minimized the other. This is not a story about hatred. It is about what happens when greatness is built on imbalance and nobody pauses to correct it. When one star becomes the empire and the other becomes the extension. So now, the question is simple. Did Pippen deserve more recognition, or was Jordan simply operating in a system that rewarded the ultimate alpha? Because however you see it, the illusion of brotherhood is gone.